Hello friends, welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. I, Dr. Taruna Bansal, Assistant Professor at the Department of Geography, Jamia Millia Islamia, will speak on man and environment relationship in geography, which is part of the paper Geographical Thought. Now, I have not written any learned objectives for this particular module because we all know that this is a relationship which has been most talked about, most deliberated upon in this particular discipline. Now, if we start from its historical roots in the Greek scholarship, when Eratosthenes coined this term geography, we see that the word geography consists of two words, geo and graphy, which simply means description of the earth or earth's description. But what is needed to be looked upon is that how Eratosthenes perceived this discipline. Now, for him, geography was a discipline which studies the relationship of man and environment, because he considered that it has to be studied, geography has to be studied as where earth is considered home of man. Similar definition of geography is seen when Beck in 1965 defines geography to understand earth as the home of man. So, you see, from Greek scholarship to the modern geography, the theme of man-environment relationship has been persisting, and it seems that it is still continuing. You know, as a person, my personal opinion, I feel that this relationship is still persisting in the form of sustainable development, because even in sustainable development we are saying that we have to preserve earth, and we are saying that man is exploiting earth, and for future generations we need to sustain, we need for the development should be there, but then resources should be also protected. So, somewhere only the way of looking at this relationship has changed, which has given rise to number of paradigms within the geographical thinking. But the theme of man-environment relation remains there to be an integral part of this geographical thinking. We start with the introduction. Geography as a discipline always had the purpose of gaining logical and useful information about the man and his habitats. This has been from the beginning of the philosophical scholarship of man. To establish my point, I would again, it's just the continuation of what I already said, that when Eratosthenes coined the term, he divided it into two parts, and the word geo comes from the Greek word ge, meaning earth, while graphy comes from graphene, which means to describe. So, what is the purpose, or what is the context in which he coined this term? It is simply that the disciplines should study earth as the home of man. This sets the root for the theme of man-environment relationship within the geographical academia. The theme became so popularized that it still persists. The history of geographical ideas clearly depicts how through ages this relationship has been perceived, talked upon, and established as one of the focal themes of the geographical thinking. The whole idea is to get more and more logical and useful knowledge of human habitat and human spread over the earth. Now, before we look into the historical backgrounds and the doctrines which establish this theme, we need to have a clear perspective what actually man-environment relationship is. Now, man and environment. Now, first we start. When we say man-environment, we start with the definition of environment. If we see the simplest definition of environment, that was given by Einstein, who says environment is everything that isn't me. That means apart from me, everything is environment. In my own simpler words, I say environment is everything beyond me. That means the moment I am just myself, anything which is apart from me becomes part of my environment. And that is why when we say environment, we should consider both the physical aspects as well as the cultural aspects. For the understanding of this relationship, one has to set the limits, how one defines the environment. As I said, the most simplistic definition was given by Einstein. Thus, one should not debate on the dualism of physical and cultural environment, rather take both as two halves of the same whole. Both physical and cultural environment influence man's action in adapting to the environment, to transforming it for satisfying his basic needs. Now, before I proceed further, I would like to explain what do I mean by the physical and cultural aspects of the environment. Physical environment is very common, and you will see that in most of the books we have physical components of environment, which states about biotic, abiotic and energy. But as a geographer, it's my personal experience that I have never seen any geography book talking of social or cultural components of environment. But I feel that they are more important in in man's decision making process, in man's adaptability to environment, because these are one which actually makes man, or rather personifies man and his personality. Now, what are these components? Now, Zelensky has given these components, and he divides these components into three types. First is mentifacts, the other is sociofacts, and the third is artifacts. Now, what do I mean by mentifacts? Zelensky says that mentifacts are basically the most important components because these consist of mental constraint, mental ability of man. So, when that is the skill. So, if man has skill, he is developing technology as it is today. Starting from food gatherers and hunters, today he is a scientific man, and this has happened because he has mental ability to develop himself, so that he can use environment to satisfy his needs. And we see that needs are also changing from time to time. So, this becomes the mentifacts. Now, as man progressed, as man became agriculturalist and then industrialist, we see that society also changed. So, when we come to sociofacts are those which molds man's habits as well as his decision making process. Now, why I am again and again telling decision making process is because when we see man environment relationship, when we see the way it has been perceived in geography, the prime focus has been, is man passive agent or an active agent. So, it can only be discussed when we know that man is contributing being through his decisions. So, when he is contributing through his decisions, we need to know what molds his decision making processes. They are nothing but these sociofacts, which can be at the individual level and at the group or society level. So, in society level we have institutions, very we all have been to those institutions, educational institutions, political institutions, and we see that if we are affiliated to one of these institutions, a person whose affiliation is to another educational institution or a political institution, the ideas, the thinking process is quite different. Similarly, at individual level, our institution starts from a home, so the family is the institution. Now, family is the institution, even the the traditions, the culture becomes part of that institution. Now, here again you'll see that within a family, two siblings have different personalities. This is why, because in spite of being children of the same parents, because they are interacting with different educational institutions or different people, the personality which emerges is different. So, the study of sociofacts becomes very important. Thirdly, it is the artifacts. As the name suggests, what is the result, product of man's interaction with environment. Again, this can be at the individual level as well as the societal level. So, individual level, my knowledge, what I am producing, especially the way I am reproducing something at an individual level. I am working at some institute, I am working in some corporate. So, what I am giving? What is my return? And at societal level, it is more in when people are living in group, and the best example can be given from the tribal societies, which have their folk, which have their culture, and they try to mingle. They do not try to mingle with the people who are not from the culture. They try to protect their identity. So, when we study environment, apart from physical is important. I am not defying the fact that physical is not important. Physical components are important, but when we are studying environment's relationship in perspective to man, the social components are equally important. So, now I go to the next section, which is the historical context of man-environment relationship in geography. In the ancient and middle ages, Greek, Rome, Indian, Chinese and Arab geographers established a relationship between man and his natural environment. Kant, in the later half of the 18th century, advocated the impact of the environment on the lifestyle and physical constitution and life of the people living in equatorial, hot deserts, Mediterranean, coastal and mountainous regions. According to Kant, the inhabitants of torrid zone are exceptionally lazy and timid, while those living in Mediterranean region where we have mild temperatures, they are industrious, hardworking and progressive. The environmental causation continued throughout the 19th century. Humboldt asserted that the mode of life of the inhabitants of the mountainous countries differs from that of the people of coastal plains and islands. Ritter too attempted to establish the cause variations in the physical constitution of body, physique and health of people living in the different physical environmental conditions. Now, this particular relationship was was influenced by the concept of Darwinism. Now, as the name Darwin comes, the first thing which comes to our mind is his monumental work, which is called The Origin of Species. The idea of defining geography in terms of man-environment relationship developed on scientific lines in the latter part of the 19th century after the publication of Origin of Species by Charles Darwin in 1859. This seminal work gave a new direction to the discipline of geography. The theory of evolution held that all living species have evolved from pre-existing forms. His geological observations and theories had one thing in common: the idea that things in the nature change with time. Most of the writers in the pre-Darwinian period discussed the man-environment relationship as a cause-effect relationship. They did not ponder into the processes which were involved in this relationship. Ratzel, for the first time, took up this issue in the first volume of his work, Anthropogeography, which was published in 1882 and was later developed by his students Sempels and Dumoulins. In France, Blacher's ideas dominated, so this rigid framework of harmony and relationship was not accepted. But in America, this was carried out by Davis, who tried to incorporate the idea of causality into the definition of geography itself. This notion was not accepted by many scholars, as they were of opinion that no study can be confined to the study of specific relationship. Moreover, this causal relationship provides an unsound methodological approach, as the intensity of the influence of environment becomes a major problem. Flaw was deeply influenced by Darwinism and opined that the man-environment relationship should be studied from this physiological point of view while delineating human regions. He applies Darwin's ideas of natural selection through environmental influence to human groups. Huntington too looked into this theme and applied it to human population while studying it at global level. Taylor investigated this idea in his studies, which were on race, population, states and cities. He concluded that these are directly influenced by environmental factors, as their developments over time is regulated by these conditions. The biggest contribution of Darwinism in geography is in establishing man's place in nature, and at the same time this makes the study of man a scientific learning. So we see, when we study man-environment relationship, the concept of Darwinism has been a lot, and it has been incorporated in different concepts given by a number of scholars over the period of time, which says, the biggest, as I said, the biggest contribution being that before Darwin's book, before this concept of Darwinism came into geography, we were studying just man and environment, a relationship between man and environment. Now here one thing needs to be thought about. When we say man-environment relationship, we are somewhere, isolating man from environment. Now, it has to be pondered on. If we talk of environment, man is part of environment. Then why do we need to study man separately? But interestingly, when we study geography as the study of earth as home of man, we put man at a higher position. And most of the geographers who do not go into studying man-environment relationship in geography criticize this particular environmentalism theme on this particular, on this point, that why are you giving man a higher position than other components or the other organisms which are equally part of the environment. Apart from Darwinism, the most important paradigm or doctrine which studied man-environment relationship was the deterministic perspective. Now, to begin with, before I start, it's the term determinism. There is a separate module which deals with the determinism in geography. So, where there you will get the idea how this paradigm came into geography, what was the path. Here, we will just very briefly discuss that what determinists do when they study man and environment relationship. In simple words, determinism says that nature determines man's activities. Now, if you take this phrase into consideration, it puts nature, it puts environment at a higher level. It says that whatever man is doing is doing because nature is allowing it. So, nature is one who is dominating, who is determining. And we see works from Greek scholarship, we have Aristotle, we have Hipparchus, we have Herodotus, all these Greek people have been talking on that. Then similarly, when we come to the middle period, we have Arabs who are speaking on that. When they are in middle period, Arabs have contributed vastly on climatology and on the physical parts of geography. And we see then when they are delineating climatic regions, they simply say that it is on the basis of climatic conditions. It is not on the basis of where man is living. It is not on the basis of the habitat of man. Now, you can easily question me saying that if it is so, then why man is not staying on top of the mountains and he is staying on the plains? Somewhere, because nature determines it. It is fine, I agree, I totally agree with what we are saying, but we have to see, is the relationship one way? No, as I have given in that perspective on the man and nature relationship, that this relationship is not a unidirectional relationship, it is not a static relationship. Large number of factors are influencing, are resulting into this relationship. So, saying that one is more powerful than the other is basically putting on a biased approach. So, when we talk of determinism, which is the first amongst the approaches which deliberates on the human nature relationship, is determinism. Now, Platt says that determinism refers to the idea that everything in human life is caused certainly by preceding events or conditions. The primary initial source of determinists for an explanation was the physical environment, and the theoretical order was centered on the belief that human activity was solely regulated and controlled by their environment. Now, determinism as a paradigm has been one of the most significant beliefs and is still continued in one form or the other. Now, people said that determinism is over. But if you actually read the literature which is there in the entire history, the geographical philosophy, you will see that determinism persists. It has been re-examined, it has been redefined, it has been revised. But determinism, rather, I should say, again, I would like to point out one thing, that in number of geography books, especially which are concentrating on geographical thought, you will see that the concept determinism or the terms determinism is being used synonym as environmentalism. But as geographer, we should not do this, because determinism talks only one aspect of man-environment relationship. In the paradigm of environmentalism, we consider all the paradigms or all the doctrines which become, and determinism is just one part of it. So, they are not synonyms, they are not identical, and we are just talking of determinism. So, determinism simply says that we have to say that nature is dominant on the activities of man, and this is quite obvious when we see the difference in the natural environment, and that is why there is variations in human behavior in the different parts of the world. Now, this was which has been giving, a lot of literature is available, number of geographers have talked on this, but one thing which becomes very prominent is that here the determinists consider humans as a passive agent. So, when man becomes passive, that means the decision making process is totally controlled and determined by environment. But when you actually see the critique of determinism and the explanations given by determinists, they argue on 2 points. One, they have never said that other factors are not important. Maybe the interpretation of determinism has been somewhat misled, because it just says man is being controlled by nature. It is not relating anyway, it is not stating anyway that other factors are not important. Secondly, they are not saying that there are no variations. They are just trying to explain the man-environment relationship in a very simpler words, that here nature is active and man is passive. The perspective which I am talking about has been there, as I already mentioned, from Greeks to to Arabs, and we also find the hints of deterministic approach in the writings of Humboldt, Ritter, Ratzel, and especially in Semple and Huntington. So throughout the history, the deterministic perspective have been looked upon, and now we come to the second perspective, which looks at man-environment relationship, which is called the possibilism, the doctrine of possibilism. Now here, what these possibilists are trying to do, now what this doctrine of possibilism is trying to explain, it is trying to explain the relationship of human being with the environment, but from a different viewpoint. It puts human at a higher level and regards it as an active agent. It is a principle which claims that environment provides opportunities, and because man is an economic man, he chooses from this possibilities. Now this was this particular concept was given by or rather propagated by French school under the leadership of Blache, but Faber was the one who coined this term possibilism, and in his work Geographical Introduction to History, which was published in 1932, he stated, again in quotes, "There are no necessities, everywhere possibilities, and man as the master of these possibilities is the judge of their use." Now again, as you will see all the modules of geographical thought, you will see that we go back, we again and again, time and again we are referring back to the Greek philosophy. Now that I will just mention one thing, why is that important is that geography as a discipline did not develop or did not become what we are studying today over time. Overnight. It is a process which has been continuing and is still continuing over decades and centuries. So wherever we get traces of the concepts and doctrines which are there in the Greek scholarship, we mention that. So that is why history becomes quite important when we study geography, especially with reference to its thought. So to divide the entire geographical philosophy into history and geography, like trying to divide it that history traces back time and geography is related with space, would be wrong, because when we are studying geography, when we are trying to develop this discipline as a scientific discipline within the ambit of sciences, we need to look back to its history, how these concepts, how these doctrines, how these paradigms initiated and how they have influenced the overall process, overall development of the discipline. So similarly, the roots of possibilism can be traced back to the works of Plato, who is considered to be the master of deductive reasoning. Though his idea went into gloom, people were not talking about possibilism. It was and they were like looking into determinism. It got support in the writings of French scholar Montesquieu in the 18th century, who is credited with developing a doctrine analogous to modern paradigm of possibilism. He opines that man possesses free will and has the ability to choose from the series of opportunities. Now similar thoughts were also put by Comte de Buffon. He was a French. He believed that man was ordered to conquer the earth and even transform it. Now these were basically possibilistic in their views, or in their view, in their way of seeing man-environment relationship. But it was only in the latter half of the 19th century under the leadership of Vidal de la Blache that possibilism became, or rather the possibilistic view of man-environment relationship developed. The focus of this philosophy was nature has set boundaries and man provided possibilities for human settlement, but the way a person responds to these conditions or adjusts it depend on the traditional way of life. He rejected the concept of material determinism and advocated favorability. He even rejected Durkheim's opinion of human geography as social morphology, rather insisted that man was a partner and not a slave of the environment. So, we see that simultaneously when determinism was, flourishing in parts of Germany, in parts of USA, there was another approach, there was another doctrine, the possibilistic doctrine, which was looking at this relationship from a different point of view. And at the same time, we also have the third perspective, which is called neo-determinism, which was given by Griffith Taylor, where he simply, it has its roots in environmental determinism, and it says that the work of man is just like a traffic policeman. He will regulate, he regulates the traffic and has no role in the speed, the number of vehicles which are coming. He cannot regulate the speed of vehicles, he cannot regulate the traffic, but he cannot regulate the speed of the traffic, but he regulates the traffic so that there is no chaos, and he calls this as stop and go determinism. Another view was given by Barrows in his presidential address to the American geographers in 1922, when he recommended that the relationship of man and environment in geography should be studied from man's adjustment to environment rather than the reverse. And Barrows' view came to be known as the concept of human ecology. Now, Hettner also supported the study of the concept of geography as the study of relationship, but he says that both the physical factors and the cultural factors, or the human factors, should be studied in relation to each other. Another concept which talks of this relationship was put up by O.H.K. Spade in 1957, when he gave the concept of probabilism. The idea is that the physical environment does not specifically determine human activities, yet it gives some reactions to others. Now, apart from this, we also, when we talk of Darwinism in the initial state, we even need to talk about social Darwinism, which is there, which says about this relationship. Now, Spade, when he was talking of probabilism, he says human action was not set in the case of all or some kind of compulsion, but rather the balance of the possibilities. For example, there is a possibility that a person uses land in a different manner. The examples have been cited in the text which is loaded along with this. So, you can look into the examples which actually says how these disciplines, how these doctrines have looked into the man-environment relationship. And I have discussed all these, especially determinism and possibilism, separately also in different modules, so that you can see how they became important paradigms in the geographical thinking. Apart from this, if we see that this, as I said, this relationship has been there throughout the history, and either in the form of determinism, possibilism, human ecology, social determinism, neo-determinism, it has been there throughout the historical process of geography. And in recent times, we see that this particular relationship is being studied or understood through the perspective of sustainable development. The doctrine of sustainable development, now it says that it is based on the theme that development means meeting the ends of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Now, this was said in the report which was given on the World Commission on Environment and Development in 1987. Now, this concept of sustainable says that we have to satisfy our mean, but at the same time look, we should have the vision that the future generations also have resources for their own need. Now, when we talk of this, somewhere in mind it comes that man is exploiting nature. But you see, if man has to develop, resources will be exploited. We cannot forego this. This is something which has to be there. Resources will be exploited. What is of need, what has to be thought about is that we should look for larger gains. That means when if development is, it should be for all. So for our meager personal gains, we should not forego larger means of the community. Now, if you see in this entire module, what I have tried to do, I will just sum up by saying, if you see the entire man-environment relationship, you can say that this relationship can be talked about under the paradigm of environmentalism. And when we talk of environmentalism, there can be 5 different themes or 5 different doctrines which explains this relationship. So, we start from the determinism, then we come to possibilism, where we talk of after possibilism we talk of neo-determinism, and then when we talk of neo-determinism, we are then also speaking of probabilism, we are speaking of we are speaking of social Darwinism, and then we come to the ecological approach, which was initiated by Barrows. So, we come off the ecological approach, and when we go to the ecological approach, we are talking of world as a system, and we end up at the sustainable development concept, which says that we have to have a vision, that we satisfy our needs, and then we even think for the future. So, what we are trying to do, which I said in the starting of my lecture of this module, that the relationship is not stagnant, is not straightforward. Large number of factors are there. So, when all these factors will be considered together, naturally the relationship becomes very dynamic, and geography, being the study of man-environment relationship, looks into this relationship from different perspectives to give it a theoretical base, so that future works can be done and can be done to make this relationship more viable. Thank you.